Hello everyone. Welcome to MFOA's webinar on improving your public engagement process, sharing best practices and lessons learned. My name is Paul Creamer. I will be your host for today's webinar. A little bit of background about myself. I completed the MFOA internship with the town of Midland in 2011 and 2012. I then moved on to the City of London and worked in financial planning and policy. And I have since moved to Hempson Consulting, and I started last week. So here's a brief outline of the presentation. I'm going to begin with an overview of public engagement, and that is going to be kind of the theory part, the purpose, why we do it, some of the realities and challenges that municipalities are facing. Secondly, I'm going to discuss some engagement techniques, and some best practices that I've identified and what some municipalities are doing. And I'm profiling some specific municipalities, London, Newmarket, and a few others. The recommendation section is just some kind of a summary of some of my general findings and some pointers that I hope you can take away from today's webinar. Just to kind of put some things into context on the webinar. When I started this process, I set some goals for myself and some objectives. So first is to provide an overview of public engagement. The next would be to share some stories, some success stories, some good news stories, and best practices. And I hope that those motivate you to try something new to engage your residents. Lastly, throughout this document, you will notice a bunch of links. Those links will bring you to further information and details on the topic or the municipality. There's a variety of reports referenced in this webinar. The webinar will be posted on the MFOA website, and you can access the hard copy of the slides there. Some disclaimers about the webinar. There is lots of content, but like I mentioned, all of the blue text are links to more information. Not all of these examples will work for all municipalities. Some of the examples I'm giving are for big and large municipalities with large budgets, maybe a specific community engagement coordinator who focuses on public engagement, and some of the smaller municipalities do not have those resources or the ability to complete some of these activities. And lastly, there are challenges to public engagement that all municipalities face. And this won't solve all of them, but I hope to solve some of them and just to provide some advice and ideas and that will help you overcome some of those challenges. I think a great way to start out anything is to provide a definition. So the definition of public engagement is based on the belief that those who are affected by a decision have a right to be involved in the decision-making process. And the municipal budget affects all residents of a municipality, so they should all have a right to engage and be involved in the decision-making process. Secondly, it is actually the process by which an organization consults with interested or affected individuals and organizations before making a decision. And lastly, it's two-way communication. I think two-way communication is key. Too many activities that municipalities do are one-way, and I like that term, two-way communication. The second term I like here is collaborative. Too often, I don't think municipalities view it as working with residents, and that's what it should be. Just work with residents, get their ideas, do some problem solving, with a goal of achieving better and more acceptable decisions. A little while ago, I attended an exhibit titled The Fourth Wall, and it was created by Dave Meslin. It's an exhibit with 36 proposals to change the political system. Dave uses the metaphor of a fourth wall. A fourth wall is a theatrical term for the imaginary barrier separating an audience from the stage. And he states that many citizens feel their voices aren't heard, and many don't know when, where, or how to interact with the democratic process, and that there is a fourth wall in municipal government, and that citizens are not able to interact with the people or staff or councillors or the decision makers. Lastly, there is a link there. It's thefourthwall.ca, and it breaks down all 36 proposals on a variety of topics. So, what are the purposes of public engagement? First one, determine key community issues and preferences. What does the community want? It's important to frame the discussion in that what level of service do you want? And to get it past just what do you want the tax increase to be? Too often the only discussion is on the end result, whether it's a 2%, 0%, or 10% increase. And there's a lot more to a budget than that. Get citizens to focus on the level of service and each individual service. The next two I thought were kind of interesting and they stood out to me. And I definitely think they're easier said than done. To improve decisions by incorporating citizens' local knowledge, and by having public engagement, it can lead to more creative and cost-effective solutions. Now, this may be asking a lot of your residents to actually provide good input. I know a lot of times the input may be misinformed, may be biased. It may be a specific stakeholder group giving the input, and they are not thinking of all the other players in the budget. Advance fairness and justice. Gain legitimacy for public decisions. Basically, if the public are involved in the process of making a decision, I think they will be a lot more accepting of anything that is decided by a municipality and potentially less critical. We all know that there are the critics out there on everything a municipality will do. And lastly, help elected representatives make the best possible decisions. In the end, they are the ones making the decisions. And any information about what the residents' preferences are will help them make better decisions. So probably 2 months ago now, I sent out a survey to all of MFOA's members. And to say the least, I think people are a little bit jaded about the public engagement process. But the fact that they completed it and there was a response of people registering for today's webinar, I think people want to improve it. So, however, these are some of the comments that I received in the survey answers. Given the current level of public engagement, any new efforts would be wasted time. Most public comments tend to be bash the council and staff. Most comments do not provide solutions to the problems identified. Most of the public are complacent and are not interested in participating in the process. There are a small number of citizens who make the most noise but do not represent the citizens as a whole. These comments lead into a list of the realities and challenges that municipalities face when doing public engagement. I think the first and most important one is there is traditionally a low turnout for planned activities, unless there is some sort of contentious issue. The same people show up all the time. I like to refer to these as the regulars. The general population is not representative, so again, it's building on the last point. Only the regulars are coming out to the meetings, and it's not capturing everyone. Most of the feedback received is negative and mostly consists of complaints. And usually there are not any suggestions on how to solve those complaints or for improvements. Lastly, the complaints do not take into consideration any trade-offs. So if residents want a new park or a new community center, there's going to be a cost to that. And usually people do not want to pay for the increased level of service, or they don't want another service, level of service, let's say in police or fire, or any other service to be cut as a trade-off. Now, especially the smaller municipalities have very few staff resources to devote to the public engagement process. Some of the larger ones may have their own designate, person hired specifically to do this. But in the small municipalities, usually it may be a treasurer or the CAO even giving their time to this process, and therefore the cost can be greater than the benefits. One of the things I think is important to communicate and educate the public on is that municipalities do not control a large portion of their budget. A lot of things are legislated. There's contracts in place, and there's also a level of service that is just expected and required for risk, or to minimize risk, that you do not want to change. The education component ties into the next point, that taxpayers lack knowledge of municipal budgets. So I think one of the goals of any public engagement process should be to educate and inform residents to be better informed of the whole budget process. So now I want to get into some of the techniques. I've broken it down into 4 general categories. The first is information giving. So this is educating and teaching the public about current initiatives, priorities, anything that's happening in the budget, and even the budget process itself. And there is a list there of a variety of things that you can do. The next is information gathering. So this is getting out, talking to the public, and getting their preference and opinions and attitudes on all issues and the budget in general. Consultation, it's a bit more of a formal process. It's obtaining specific and detailed feedback, whether it be policy options or decisions. And the last one is empowerment. This is beyond the scope of today's webinar, but there is some really interesting material, and you can do some more research on the next 2 topics, participatory budgeting and citizens advisory committees. They're both up and coming, but they're very intensive, big processes that require a lot of resources and staff time. But they are options, and I recommend if you want to do more research or are intrigued, there's lots of information on the website or on the internet. Now, ineffective activities. I don't think just doing engagement activities is enough. If the public feels that the government is doing engagement because they have to and not actually listening, the public will lose trust in the process and become even more disengaged. Now, public meetings. We all have them, and I feel like this picture here is very representative of a typical municipality's public meeting. Now, in this picture, there's lots of empty seats. There's one demographic represented. It's not very diverse. And I can't say that the people in the picture look very thrilled. They look a little bored, and one person there might even be sleeping. So, let's talk about public meetings a bit more. The pros. There are some pros. The fact that public meetings are unavoidable. They are a big piece, or They're part of the process. They always have been. People count on this. They know they can get involved in this way, and it's very general knowledge. And it's easy for people to participate from the outside, to watch, whether it be in person or on TV. And then people can participate, and they know that they can through delegations. A benefit of delegations is that they are spoken directly to the decision makers, and they're getting that feedback immediately. Now, some of the cons, and these were very, very evident in the feedback received in the surveys. First of all, when giving a delegation, it's very intimidating. There's a large room of people, or even it could even be televised. I think with council, usually they're sitting up higher, and I don't know if that creates an equal two-way communication. Usually only the educated, confident, or elitist will speak. Usually you only get up to 5 minutes, and if it's a relevant, important topic, the resident may want more than 5 minutes. I know with a minute left, they're given the warning, and there's no flexibility, and people I've seen are cut off right at the 5-minute mark, even if they're right in the middle of a sentence. Now, the last point, the speaker may feel entitled to their requests and or opinions being accommodated. I think when someone puts in so much effort and time into doing a delegation and getting up in front of those people, they feel that council should implement their opinions and that it should be listened to, and when it's not, I think they get offended. A couple of ways to make it better. You want to have two-way conversations. So something I will be discussing in a few minutes is our budget workshops. And this is more of a two-way conversation. People get involved and participate and complete activities. Second part is a listening night. It's something that's less formal. It can include an education component at the beginning, so whether it be a presentation, and it's something that's dedicated only to listening to the residents speak and only to the budget. The last point is to hold meetings on both weeknights and weekends. This may not be able to be completed or accommodated by all municipalities. It is very resource intensive to hold another meeting, and not all councillors can always do a weekend meeting. But this does allow for a lot more percentage of the population who work late or have different hours than your Monday to Friday, 9 to 5, to participate. So budget surveys. This was a common theme that a lot of people want to be doing within or want to implement into their public engagement process. They're an opportunity for council and the public to comment on service levels and program offerings, priorities, and projects that are going to be included in the capital budget and forecast. A couple of examples there. Township of Brock have done an extensive survey, and then the town of Milton there is an example of how to compilate all of the comments together. You can do just a summary, or you can do all of the comments together. I think that second part of the compilation and sharing the findings is almost just as important, if not more important, than the actual survey. You need to give feedback back to the residents on what was accomplished out of that process and how their time, contributing their time, benefited the municipality.